Please welcome to the stage Hina Baloch of General Motors for a conversation with Bloomberg Green's Lauren Kiel.
Hina, I love the title of our session, which is that an all-electric future must also be all-inclusive. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure everybody here is pretty familiar with GM's commitment to going all-electric, to transitioning to electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. But tell us about that second part. You guys are talking a lot about equitable climate action as a piece of your climate action plan. So what does that actually even mean?
Yeah, so I think equitable climate action work is something that I'm very, very passionate about at GM. And equitable climate action is this recognition of what I would call vulnerability differential, knowing that all communities, all people, all races, all genders are not equally impacted by the changes in the climate, and then making an active investment into the communities to ensure that we are focused towards addressing the challenges that impact specific communities as a result of climate change. For General Motors, that has translated into the launch of our Equitable Climate Action Plan, which has 4 pillars. There's work of the future, so really focusing on how do we transition the workforce towards an equitable future. There is a focus on an all-electric future with affordability of the EVs. And then there is a focus on accessibility of the infrastructure, so making sure that we address the issues around charging deserts, anything, particularly in the communities where charging may not be as ubiquitous as in others. And then finally, and most importantly, I would say, is the Climate Equity Fund. It's a $50 million funding from General Motors that's focused on grassroots organizations that are at the front line of fighting climate change in the communities.
You bring up a really important point. That's not every community is impacted the same by climate change. And it's often the communities who are not the biggest causes of this, or the people, the populations who are not being the biggest causes of this, who are seeing the biggest impact from this. So how are you guys thinking about that as you think about your Equitable Climate Action Plan?
Yeah, so I'm personally from Pakistan, which in the US or in the developed world you'd call the Global South. And what we see is that the per capita income of developing countries, per capita income of a poorer household on the climate change is far less than the brunt that they have to bear when there is natural disaster, displacement, job issues and all that. So our plan is to focus on an all-electric, affordable and equitable future, which has, again, I would reemphasize a focus on EV access, EV affordability, and specifically transition of the workforce. And I would remind some of the most recent examples from General Motors. Our partnership with Honda focuses on EV affordability. We have made big investments in Lake Orion, Michigan plant for EV, and then at Amtrak Factory Zero in Michigan, and then also at Spring Hill, Tennessee. So we are moving at a very fast pace towards an equitable transition to an all-electric future.
A lot of what you just said involves partnerships, because this is you guys are making a major commitment here. You're taking on a major problem. It's obviously not something you can do alone. As large as General Motors is, yes, you need partners along the way. Mm-hmm. So as you're thinking about how you find those partners, why are you thinking more of like a grassroots nature of that? What are you looking for in the partners that you're trying to bring to bear on this?
Yeah, I really think that the world is at a moment with the climate action where we should all be all hands on deck, is what I would call it. And I would also say that I see my work as a collage artist, right, in the climate field, where you have to bring policymakers and you have to bring technologists and you have to make corporations and you have to bring scientists, academia, all of that. And I would say an important part of that collage is the grassroots organizations, because they're in the communities, they understand the problems of the community, they're working in the advocacy, education, all of those aspects when it comes to climate change and climate resiliency. So I feel that it is firstly very important to recognize that. Secondly, in my experience of working in GM in this sector for the last maybe around 10-something years, I've learned that grassroots organizations are a lot of the times women-led. They're a lot of the time people of color-led. They're a lot of the time community-led. And ironically, but not surprisingly, they're also the least funded organizations. So I would say roughly around less than 1% of global funding goes towards grassroots organizations. So a big part of the $50 million funding that I mentioned before is going to go towards grassroots organizations from GN. And we started the program last year. We've already partnered with around 30 nonprofits across the US. I would want to mention 2 organizations that we've been working closely with. One is called Valley Can, and the focus of their work is towards training the future EV technicians. And we also partner with Rocky Mountain Institute to address the challenges of EV deserts, or EV charging deserts.
Has it been easy for you to find partners in this space, or is that a challenge?
You know, I would say that it was a challenge specifically in the beginning, and I think it is a growing area. There is still, like I said, the funding is limited, which tremendously hinders the capacity building of these organizations, which tremendously hinders their ability to apply for grants or hire or do all the things that larger organizations are able to do. So I would say that, yes, it's a challenge, but I also think there is a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of work in this area. So it's a challenge, but then also it's our responsibility to make a change by building the capacity of these organizations.
What would make your job easier as you're thinking about how to be more equal and inclusive in your transition?
You know, I think it's not an easy job. I think anybody working in the climate space will tell you that it's extremely challenging. But I think I do want to induce some optimism here, particularly keeping in mind, I feel that for the first time, at least in my lifetime of 30-somethings-year-old, I'm not going to reveal my age here. Edit that part if I ended up saying that. But in my lifetime of 30 years, as far as, and in the last 10 or so years where I've focused on this area, I have realized that this is really the first time that we are kind of stepping away from this adaptive theory focus, right? Where we thought, oh, we could do anything, humanity could do anything to the planet, to themselves, to the species, and we will adapt. And we've realized that's not the case. There is a limitation of how much humanity can adapt. And I think that has led to sort of an urgency of action, and that has also led to people coming together. I do have a favorite Persian-American poet. He's a modern poet. His name is Kaveh Akbar. And he has a poetry which I'll recite a line of it in Farsi, and I will translate the essence. It talks about Maharchi badaste dade bashim daste dadim, which means that whatever we could have given up, whatever we could have lost, we've lost. So there's that sort of thinking that we should have towards the climate and the planet, that whatever damage we could have done, we've done, and now it's time to change that. And
it's really beautiful.
Thank you. And Lauren, I would say that personally, I'm very Schopenhauerian, very skeptic. But more recently, I've been reading a lot of work from Cli-Fi work, which I recently learned is a subgenre of science fiction. And I've been reading a lot of work from Octavia Butler and Ursula Le Guin, and kind of thinking about in all of the pessimism and all of the challenges, there's definitely an opportunity to be cautiously optimistic.
We had a kickoff event last night with Bill McDonough, who you may know, and many of you may know, was the father of circularity. And one of the things he said was, we should be so excited that we get to do this work, that it's amazing that we get to tackle these challenges. What an exciting thing to be doing with our lives. Yeah. And so I would love to hear from you, what are you so excited about with work that you're doing around the EV transition, around equitable climate action? What gets you excited to wake up and work on this in the morning?
Yeah, I think the most incredible part of the work, I would probably mention 2 things that I already mentioned. I think the first thing is the opportunity to be able to be sort of the collage artist, to be even within the organization, right? Outside the organization also, but also within GM, working with policy, working with scientists, working with people across the company, and trying to influence positive change. And really being heartened to know that everybody in the company wants to do the right thing and wants to bring the right kind of change. So I think that really keeps me excited about the role. And like I said earlier, I think I really see a sea change here of everybody sort of really coming together. and being very realistic about, yes, we do have a problem at hand. The adaptive theory mindset will not work, and now what can we do about it? So I think this idea of being really identifying the problem and then being solution-oriented is what makes me very excited.
That's fantastic. I love the idea of thinking of yourself as a collage artist. I think everybody in this room probably can and should feel the same way about themselves. So Hina, thank you so much. Thank you so much to General Motors for this wonderful spotlight.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.